Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Star Trek Discoverage, the live podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about this week's episode of Star Discovery. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, a.k.a. Caliban, and I wish I had time to be sipping gibbers on a beach, but I've got to find this guy's cudgel. He's very insistent. Joining me on the show, again, as co-host filling in for Ella Pearson, is science fiction writer and editor and the father half of podcasting duo Generations Geek on the Chronic Rift Podcast Network. It's Scott Pearson. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here.
Good to have you. How was your holiday season, and how is 2019 looking for you?
My holiday season was a little odd because, as you know, your regular co-host, my daughter, is across the pond, so
That's
it was
right.
our first holiday season without her in the house, so that was weird, but it was fine.
Sure.
And 2019 so far, in its short couple of days, is good. I've got a bunch of freelance work coming in, so I got that going for me.
That's great. Ella's on assignment in Portugal currently, I believe?
Currently in Portugal, yes.
Wow. That's pretty great. She can be heard on the Generations Geek podcast talking about her experiences at the Destination Star Trek convention in England this last year, and also checking out a Tolkien exhibition over there.
Yeah, she's getting to do lots of fun, geeky things. She visited Sherwood Forest. I mean, she's doing everything that I wish I could be doing.
Yeah, of course. You don't think that you never think that there's a real Sherwood Forest. You hear about it a lot, but yeah, I guess that's
there is. There's not much left to it. Actually, when I did my study abroad decades ago, I tried to go to Sherwood Forest. A buddy of mine and I had it all planned out. We were out on the road waiting for the bus to come by that was going to take us to, I can't remember now if it was probably taking us to the train station or some sort of, place to switch to a long-term travel.
Right.
And we stood there, and then the bus was coming, and in England, the buses don't stop automatically. You always flag them down. And we waved at the bus, and it just drove right on by us. I don't know what happened there, but then through some sort of scheduling thing, we never actually got there. So
okay, all right.
so that it's an extra little twist on me that the kid got there first, even though I tried decades ago.
This bus doesn't go to Sherwood Forest. Not anymore. Also joining us on the show tonight, he's a New York Times bestselling author. He's written over a dozen historical and fantasy books for young readers. He's also the author of The Assassination Game, a Starfleet Academy young adult novel set in the Kelvin universe. It's Alan Gratz. Alan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back on board. Your last book, Grenade, came out in October of last year. What are you working on currently?
So I'm working on a book now about D-Day next year. This year, it's not next year anymore. It's this year.
This year.
That's right. It's 3 days old. But this year is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Yeah. And so I'm going to have a book coming out that focuses on a number of different characters. Still a young adult, a middle grade novel, for kids, for young readers. But focusing on the way that a lot of different people from different places and different backgrounds had to come together to fight against a common enemy. Something that I kind of feel like it is Starfleet. I mean, is the Federation. And Roddenberry served, and a number of the writers on the original show had served, and the show was only 20 years after World War II, and I really think that some of the early storylines like Balance of Terror are clearly inspired by World War II and events then. So it's I feel like 75 years later we still haven't gotten it right, and that's kind of what the book is also about. That D-Day was this incredible time of coming together for a common cause, but there were still too many people marginalized or segregated who were asked to pitch in, but then went right back to being segregated and marginalized when the war was over.
Yeah, right.
And that many of those people are still fighting their own battles for equality.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about on Enterprising Individuals, specifically about the fact that so many of the creators did serve. in World War II, and that informed a lot of their writing. And episodes like Balance of Terror, also an episode like Conscience of the King, where Kirk is trying to take who he thinks is Kodos to task for the atrocities that he committed. And it's art. Reality reflects art sometimes. So you've been on the show previously. You were on Discoverage previously to talk about season 1. And I think your review of season 1 was mostly positive.
Yeah, I liked it. I'm torn because I feel like the writing was uneven at times in the first season, and I think that a lot of times they sacrificed good character development for fast twists and turns and trying to constantly pull the carpet out from under us. And I'm really hoping that, and for what I've read, of the spoilery, non-spoilery stuff for next season, is that maybe they're going to settle down a little bit. I hope that they keep up the pace and that there are still twists and turns, but sometimes I felt like they were throwing changes at us last season just to throw changes at us, just to keep the plot churning. Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to see us settle in and feel like we live on that ship and see some continuity with the characters there. And so those are my hopes for the upcoming season. I'm definitely all in on the next season. I'm glad that we have Star Trek back in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I agree with that those desires, and I think that the plot has been really heavy in a lot of the teasers that we've seen. It seems like we are really going to settle in on Discovery under Captain Pike, and it's the sort of thing where, as an old school Star Trek fan, I look back to the days of the one-shot episodes, An Interesting Planet or a Conflict, and it seems like that serialized storytelling, like where are we collecting the lights, or are we going from light to light,
right?
What's the overarching sort of meta plot? That seems to be, that's just the way TV really is now.
Right. Yeah, and I think that they have to, we can't look backwards. We can't say, I wish it was just the old episodic thing. It's like saying I wish MTV still played music videos. Like we can be nostalgic for what something was, but we can also at the same time recognize that we've moved beyond that we can't go back to that. Yeah. Discovery cannot exist in today's television world, and I say television by meaning all media that shows anything like a television show anymore. And because we can't even describe TV as TV anymore. But I say that meaning that Discovery can't be episodic like TNG. It can't even be loosely episodic the way DS9 was. It has to be much more involved. It has to have the overarching story elements. It has to have the mid-season twist or turn that sort of turns everything on its ear. This is just the way television is now. And I think that if it were to go back and try to be the old Trek, it would bring along the old Trek fans, but not any new ones.
Yeah. Scott, did you want to add something about the structure of Discovery?
Well, I think that the comments that you've made on the first season are fair. It was, it was very busy, lots of stuff going on. And as an older person myself, I do have that same nostalgic fondness for the original series and more episodic stories occasionally. But I agree that that the television medium has changed to a more serialized format, and so they really dug in on that for the first season. As far as the second season goes, I can neither confirm nor deny if I know anything or don't know anything about the second season, because otherwise, John Van Sitters will have the Star Trek ninjas descend on me.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that. Section 31 would be right in here to take Scott out. Yeah. Alan, what did you think of the short treks so far?
So I've watched them all. Uh-huh. Yeah, I've watched all of them, and the one we're going to talk about tonight is, I think, perhaps my favorite, and it's right up there to me with Calypso. I also enjoyed that one quite a lot. I thought, I love the 15 to 20 minute format. I'm excited about this, and I think as a first foray into these by the official Trek folks. We've had this from unofficial Trek folks before,
Right.
but as a first foray from the official Trek folks, I'm excited, and I hope that this is something they continue to do. I was a little disappointed in a couple of them in terms of plot. I thought that even though it's 12, 15, 20 minutes, I thought you can still, in that amount of time, tell a story that has a beginning and a middle and an end. And I think the more successful ones did that. I think the less successful ones either didn't do that at all or did it and there was no tension or drama to the beginning, middle, and an end. And so I think they were a lot of fun, and they're great to pull things out. I think I liked the ones that were off the ship better, like tonight's off disco.
Sure.
But it's still fun to see a different part of something and to get a scene from some other part of the universe. We know we've discussed on this or Enterprising Individuals, one of the podcasts, we've discussed what a big universe this is. We've got decades of great canonical backstory to explore, and the short treks are a great way to dip into some of those and have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into it. Tonight we've seen the last in a series of 4 short films set in the universe of Star Trek Discovery called Short Treks. This week's short trek is The Escape Artist, featuring the character Harry Mudd. And before we start, as always, we're setting a course for the spoiler zone, listeners, so be warned. We're glad you've decided to join us, but if you haven't seen the episode, spoilers are incoming. The official synopsis for The Escape Artist is: Harry Mudd, back to his old tricks of stealing and double-dealing, finds himself in a precarious position aboard a hostile ship just in time to try out his latest con. The episode was written by Mike McMahon, who is a writer for Rick and Morty, and it was announced last year that he would be developing an animated Lower Decks series for All Access. Speculation, gentlemen. What do you think that we might see with an animated Star Trek series?
Scott, you want to jump in?
Sure. I'm expecting it to be not quite as out there as Rick and Morty, but I'm assuming it's going to that it's going to have fun with the Lower Decks premise and be more comedic in general. I'm excited because I'm a huge fan of Rick and Morty, and in amongst all the insanity and just way beyond edgy kind of stuff that they do have some amazing science fiction in Rick and Morty sometimes, and it can be so imaginative visually. When you do animation, of course, it's like you have a limitless budget, and so I really hope that they take advantage of that with Lower Decks. I'm a little concerned because if it is about the Lower Deck characters, they're the ones that you maybe don't expect to get as many away missions.
Right.
But I'm hoping that they open it up and they have those people tagging along on missions or getting off the ship, and then we get some really huge sci-fi zaniness within the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, we might be seeing a little bit of what it might look like in an episode like this, or even in an episode like Runaway, where, like you said, maybe they're not leaving the ship because, of course, the captain and the first officer have to leave the ship all the time. But, Lower Decks characters might be cleaning something up, or hanging around like Tilly is just having a coffee or something like that, and then runs into something that maybe the captain never finds out about. Alan, what do you think?
Yeah, you could still get them off the ship by having them do all those awful jobs that the captain and first officer don't do. Like, right. There's the geology surveys and the botanical surveys, and or maybe they have to go down and replicate a bunch of stuff. It's all the boring, tedious stuff that nobody wants to do who's in charge. And so the lower, I think there's a whole bunch of potential for fun, and they could have all kinds of adventures. Some of one of my favorite episodes of the old Justice League cartoon was like when Booster Gold is running around trying to do the right thing while all the big heroes are fighting the big villains. Right. And like he's essentially the lower decks of the Justice League. I mean, he's the C team. You know, he's not even B team.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of great humor to be had on the fringes of what's going on. And you know, we had that one good episode in TNG that was the lower decks that clearly this is is taking its inspiration from. Yeah. The idea that we're going to see ensigns in different departments doing their thing. Based on tonight's episode, I have high hopes. When I first read about the writer of tonight's episode and saw that he was doing this, I was like, an animated Lower Decks that's a comedy? But then after I watched this, I'm like, I'm all in. I think this could be a really good show.
And speaking of Justice League, I just realized that I've got Alan Scott on my show tonight. So that's...
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're Green Lantern. Yeah.
And if you like that nerd alert, here's another one. I used to play the Star Trek role-playing game from Last Unicorn Games, and we had our characters, and we took it seriously. We thought of ourselves as like real Starfleet officers. We got a little bored after a while of the long adventures that we had with those characters, so we sort of shifted to lower decks characters, like, you know, a little bit less responsibility. And on our first mission out, we got a bunch of people killed, and we had to stop that part of the adventure because that was not working out okay. So hopefully it won't get that bad on the animated show. This episode was directed by actor and star Rainn Wilson. Of course, he plays Harry Mudd. He previously directed 3 episodes of The Office, so he's somewhat new to the game, but I think he does a pretty good job in this episode. This episode is maybe, as far as I know, the first one to ever focus, at least in part, on a Tellarite character. Played in the episode by Harry Judge. He also played various Tellarite characters previously on Discovery. So let's get into it. I mean, what did you guys think of The Escape Artist? Scott, what'd you think?
I enjoyed it. It gave us a tone that was a little bit more similar to the original series Harry Mudd episodes, especially the second one, I Mudd.
Yeah.
And so you got to see the more comedic side of the character, and it played off that well. I liked how they fitted into the continuity, that it was after his last appearance on Discovery, but then it kind of does a sort of call forward to the original series because it involves androids, and again in his second appearance on the original series, that was the whole thing that was on this planet full of androids,
right?
And then the just playing off the idea that he is just this lifelong criminal, you know, that just like he's always in trouble, he's always trying something, he's always just barely escaping. So it had a lot of fun with the basic premise that we have for this Harry Mudd character.
Yeah, I don't want to get too continuity copy, but I thought, you know, the androids were clearly a reference to I Mudd, but are we to believe now that he's had contact? Because the androids are supposed to be from, they were created by like a race from the Andromeda Galaxy or something like that, is what's mentioned, I think, in I Mudd. So are we to believe that he's had contact with them before, or he's stolen and is using their technology?
No, the way I took it, and this is only from my own obsessive continuity.
Well, I trust your thinking. I trust your obsession. For the reasons you stated, I would be reluctant to consider them the same androids. Yeah.
I think that this is some other thing. But what it does set up is that he has a familiarity with using this kind of technology.
Okay.
And that's why this, you know, goofball character would then be able to interact with the androids, you know, 12 years down the road.
Sure.
in his future. But, you know, I don't know, in some way, if you want to be real hardcore, I think that you would, you know, sort of think that it doesn't make sense that he's with androids now because it's 12 years before he ends up on the android planet. But that doesn't bother me because there's obviously more than one source for Android technology across the Star Trek galaxy. So
yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice echo of that episode, and not meant to be a continuity connection with that episode.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're told when the Tellarite brings the android version of Mudd on board and doesn't realize it. The Starfleet officer is like, oh yeah, he makes these. You weren't with it long enough for it to fail. And when he opens the door, one of them is banging its head against the wall.
Yeah. Right.
So I think these are the level of android that he's building is good enough to fool you for 30 minutes. I mean,
right.
we were with it the whole time, and then the arm popped off. Before he could put it in. So I think it's just a nice way of echoing the Android episode, with Mudd from the original series, but not meant to be continuity of the same androids.
Yeah, and I liked.
Go ahead, Scott.
There was a one of the androids that was in the room there on the Starfleet ship. Looked like he was wearing a uniform very similar to the outfit that Mudd wore in I, Mudd.
Right. Yeah, he's got the blue jacket with the gold epaulets on it.
Yeah. So that was a fun little call out there as well.
Does this put into question, when we see Harry Mudd again, should we be worried that he might be an android? Can we trust when we see Mudd again that it's actually him?
Battlestar Galactica all over again.
Yeah, right. Right.
He's a toaster.
Yeah. Scott, did you enjoy the episode? Or sorry, Alan,
yes.
Did you enjoy the episode?
Oh yeah, I loved it. And like Scott, I also liked that it felt a little bit more old school Mudd than new school Mudd. The two times that we saw him in the Discovery season, the regular season, he was more evil than lovable. And I've read Rainn Wilson talking about the character, and he said, look, he's defended the darker take on Mudd in Discovery by saying, look, in the original series, he was planning on abandoning the crew with the androids, and he was going to kill people. People could die because of his schemes, and he was okay with that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the older version was much more of a con man, a lovable con man, and yes, some of the stuff he was doing was dangerous. But I really felt like the take on Mudd in Discovery was really mean-spirited and much darker. And I love this version of him because he's still doing dark stuff. And when the Tellarite brings up his list of crimes, murder is listed 2 or 3 times. So they're not backing away from the darker nature of this character. But now we got a little bit more of seeing him use the same lines over and over again was really funny and really made him much more of a con man. Now that the times we saw him on Discovery, it seemed like he was in full control of his situation. I mean, admittedly, one time he's imprisoned by the Klingons, but he's working with the Klingons. He's not getting beaten up by the Klingons. Like he's pulling all the right strings. And then of course in the next one, he's got the time device and he's really a boss. This time we got to see the times that he really fails, and I thought that made him a lot more human.
Yeah, I love the fact that after the crew of Discovery hands him over to the loving embrace of Stella, they apparently went to his criminal file and put penetration of a space whale in there. We'll just get into that one too.
Yeah. And he kind of owns it. He owns it. He's like, you had to be there for that one.
Yeah, it was a very specific situation. I really did like the flashback structure, and it's a great comedic thing that I'm sure they used on Rick and Morty, but you get it all over where it's like, I've never ever done this before. Flashback. Yeah, I'm doing this right now. Yeah, yeah, and getting to see how he's using these techniques that he's using on other people and that just aren't working on Tevrin Crit. The Tellarite. Something that I found was interesting, and I don't know if this is digging too far in, but he makes up what's clearly a lie, at least from his perspective, about a resistance against the Federation. Yeah. We don't see well, we see it sometimes. As Trek goes on, we've seen it more and more, a criticism of the society of the Federation and how other races might see them. And the Tellarite seems interested, but he's kind of pretending to be interested just for the bit, I guess. So I wonder if that will be a thing in the future, if we will see more criticism of the Federation. I know there's been criticism from the fan base that they feel like in the first season of Discovery, the Federation is not acting much like the Federation. And so we're still kind of hammering things out before we get to, the grand future of playing Dixon Hill on the holodeck. But I kind of wonder
he mentions being taxed by the Federation.
Yeah, and there's a tax as well. Yeah.
I don't know if that's more, just bluster but he's trying to legitimately con the guy, and he's like they tax me, like he's trying to get him onto his side. Like, does the Federation really tax people? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, and I wouldn't think that they would offer just straight up bounties for people either. But
I know.
But I guess maybe if you want to clean up space, that's the way to do it. I'm not sure.
And I'm trying to remember if there was mention of a bounty in the original series. I don't think so. I mean, he was certainly essentially had the equivalent of warrants out for his arrest, I guess. But
right.
Maybe it's. I mean, because we are, a little bit earlier in the history. There might be things going on that. Even by the time of the original series, 10 years or so later, have passed on, that they don't do bounties anymore. And as far as the taxes goes, the references to how the economy works in the Federation has always been muddled throughout the series.
Yeah.
Depending on what the needs of the story. If the story needs the person to say, "Oh, we're a moneyless society," that's what's said. But then every once in a while, it's like, "Oh, I need credits for something," because the story needs, So I don't know.
Yeah, there's that great moment in TNG where Riker has to he's trying to get information out of the lady playing the four-armed lady playing the piano, and she's like, you got a little something, to sweeten the pot. He's like, we don't use money. She's like, well, you got nothing.
Yeah, of course you don't. Right.
That's a fair point. I mean, they got nothing.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, they're not. Nobody will take their threat seriously, and they can't grease their palms. So I don't know what the Federation expects.
In one of the first flashbacks that we see when Mudd is dealing with Tevin Crit, we see him flashing back to being the captive of a Klingon, and maybe I'm still getting used to this whole new Klingon thing, but that Klingon seemed pretty pale. He seemed to have almost a Vok-y kind of skin to him. I didn't know if it was supposed to be implied that might have been Vok.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
I did not think of that at the time. Now I'm going to have to go back and watch that again. I mean, all that occurred to me was that I was really glad that they had done a flashback to the Klingons, because that was just another way to tie it in to the continuity.
Yeah, maybe we went right from there, that scene, to him being on the ship where we find him in the first season of Discovery.
Yeah.
So we've talked on this episode about how they've sort of balanced out the character of Mudd. And I think I would agree that if this is where they're going with it, like as far as going forward, I like them cutting a tone in between the sort of more goofy Roger Carmel Mudd and the more ruthless Mudd that we see played by Rainn Wilson. Although I feel like the Rainn Wilson one does fit a little better into this kind of more dangerous universe that we've kind of developed with Star Trek Discovery. And going totally off the beaten path, just while I have you guys, because I don't know when I'll have you again, what are your brief thoughts about the upcoming Picard show?
Oh, I'm excited. I think we talked about this a little bit on our Enterprising Individuals podcast, the last one we did, but I'm excited. I was intrigued recently by the small conversation around like how do you bring back Data, and there was much talk about other characters from TNG era making cameo appearances on the shows, which I would be very excited to see. But then there was the question of what do you do with Brent Spiner? How do you handle a robot that's not supposed to age when the actor is clearly aged. And I'm intrigued to actually see them recast the role of Data. I'm good with that, and I think it would be a lot of fun to find a new actor for Data. And you could even retcon it a little bit by saying he's changed his appearance because he's decided. He grew a beard once. You think he could?
True. Yeah.
he could change the outward physical form that he carries. But I think it's a great opportunity. Although I've also read Patrick Stewart saying that he's been talking with the writers and challenging them to do different stuff. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what we'll get. Scott, is there anything that you can reveal that you know?
No. But
moving on.
Wait, let me rephrase that. Do you know anything?
But I think that I really don't know anything at this point. I don't think anyone really knows anything outside of a handful of people. And I'm just very excited for it, because, Patrick Stewart obviously is great. And, my buddy Kirsten Beyer, she knows what she's doing. They've got Michael Chabon in the writing room. And of course, he is a great writer and, a huge geek that has gotten a lot of respect, like as a writer of literature. He's one of those few people that kind of crosses over, that gets a lot of respect as a writer and also happens to be a huge nerd.
Right.
And so I just think that they have such a great group of people at the core there bringing this together. I'm very positive about it and very excited, but at this point, I just have no idea where they're going to go with it. I mean, there's so many places they could go because of the time that has passed. There's so much that could have happened in the intervening years between the end of Nemesis and where we're picking up now. They could take Picard anywhere. They could have, if we get a return of other characters, what has happened to them in the intervening decades? Yeah. They could be captains, they could be this, they could be. I mean, they really have. Practically a blank page where to go with all these characters. Do we know
what Picard's role or position will be in this new show? Is he going to be an admiral? Is he going to be an ambassador? Do we know anything about that?
I don't think that we do. I just know that Alex Kurtzman, the producer, has said that it will be very different, and I believe that he said it would be contemplative. Which, I mean, I think we all assumed that having Captain Picard or Jean-Luc Picard involved. So, nobody knows.
Well, and he's not going to be doing an action hero stuff at his age either. I mean,
I wouldn't put it past him.
Well,
he still could.
Yeah, but there could be some really terrific plots, though, that don't require action and adventure, but still have a lot of tension to them. A lot of sort of Federation intrigue, and galactic intrigue. So I'm very hopeful. I love Patrick Stewart and happy to see him back in the role.
Yeah, me too. Well, okay, back to The Escape Artist. Yeah. Something that I wanted to sort of examine is I feel like there's a lot of racial profiling going on about the Orions. Like every time we see the Orions, they're involved in something dirty, something underhanded or criminal. And of course, this is set, before the original series. We go on to, I guess, DS9, and we see them there. We see them in Enterprise. And they're always up to no good. And when are we going to see some Orions doing something that... I mean, there must be some part of Orion society that isn't involved in a giant criminal conspiracy to do bad things across the universe.
You want the Orion doctors, you want the Orion engineers.
Yes. Yeah. There are good ones. There must be.
Yes. And it seems to me, I'm drawing a blank now, but it seems to me that there's been some stuff like that in some of the novels that...
Sure.
So that acknowledges that there's this Orion syndicate that gets all the bad press, but then there's got to be the actual rest of the population of the species that and it's kind of it's more similar to the way that the Klingons or the Romulans were portrayed in the original series, where they're just the bad guy,
right? Or the Ferengi in the TNG DS9 always being greedy. Like there's, I guess we get DS9. They start to do different stuff with Nog and Rom. But they feel like they're really the anomaly. But I guess we do get to see a little bit of different stuff from them. But racially, like every other Ferengi you meet is exactly stereotypical.
Yeah. And that's, and I think a lot of that is just, it just makes it easier to tell the stories. But that's a problem that you get in a lot of televised sci-fi, is that you get the monoculture thing. Right. It's like, a species is just the same across the whole thing. And then that way they can just, fill a certain role that's needed in the drama of the story. But yeah, it would be nice to see that opened up here and there, and so that you get away from that feeling of stereotyping.
Some of the races that haven't been explored as much, the Tellarites, for example, or the Andorians. We had a little bit of Andorian stuff on Enterprise, but for the most part, those are a couple of races that were shown in the original series and then didn't get a lot of play in TNG and DS9 era stuff. Tellarites just disappeared, and those are races now that they can show us those people doing different things, because we haven't been told they all do X. Those races may actually have a lot more room for some layered portrayals because they haven't been established with stereotypes.
Yeah, I want a whole Tellarite arc on Discovery, and I also want the rehabilitation of the Orions. Definitely want that as well.
The Orion scene in this was really funny, though. There were many good jokes in this. I was laughing throughout it, but the Cape conversation was really great. And then, and then for the woman to come in and be like, we have a camera on the room, right? I mean, like that's some. I just think that's some really good, tight humor, and it was a very quick scene, but really well done.
Yeah, I just liked how over it she was. She's like, okay, all right. I'm just
she's like, come on, really?
Yeah, come on. Well, I want to talk about season 2, or your guys' ideas about season 2. So if there's anything else you want to say about the escape artist, say it now.
I did want to. Oh, go. You go ahead, Scott. And
I was just going to say, as far as looking at the continuity of character, I wanted to make a follow-up comment on Harry Mudd, because in his first appearance in Mudd's Women, he's basically a sex trafficker using illegal drugs, and so it's one of those weird things where the show took a humorous tone in many ways, even though the subject matter was incredibly dark. Right. And so we have this tendency to, and then of course, because we had Carmel's performance as such a great, flamboyant performance, we all have these memories of Harry Mudd just being this lighthearted, funny, lovable rogue. But it's like, man, he was up to really nasty stuff. And it kind of reminds me of the trouble with Tribbles in that regard. It's like, the trouble with Tribbles is obviously, a well-loved, for every reason, humorous episode. But what was really going on there were the Klingons poisoned this grain that could have wiped out an entire planet of people.
Yeah.
And so I think that his portrayal in Discovery, the stuff that he's up to isn't that different than the stuff that he's up to in the original series, but in the overall series has a darker tone, and so it really comes across so much darker. And a weird thing about that is you don't think of him necessarily, especially as we saw him in the original series, as being a murderer. And in Discovery, we see him murdering people left and right. But by the time the timeline resets at the end of that episode, I don't think anyone actually has been killed. He's killing people left and right, but then he knows that he's going to reset things.
Right.
And so it's kind of interesting there that they kind of get to have both sides of this. It's like you get to see him being brutally murderous, but in reality, at the end, it's like everything's been reset. I don't think there was anyone that ended up dead by the end of the episode. Even the poor space whale was still alive.
Right.
And the character, then he did have actually another appearance. There was a Mud animated episode,
right,
where he was up to his same shenanigans with a love potion that created an embarrassing incident between Nurse Chapel and Spock.
Right.
And then this just goes to show how popular this character was. J.A. Lawrence, the wife of James Blish, and they had written all the novelizations of the original teleplays. They actually wrote an original Mud novella. That was, just more the same, lovable Harry out cheating people.
Right.
Space pimp. Yeah.
He really mellows out once he gets into white slavery.
And I think I just have one more quick comment on the continuity. I think the other thing that's interesting about the continuity is looking at the glimpse that we got of Stella in Discovery, and then looking at how Harry portrayed her in android form.
Right.
In I, Mud, and how he had obviously soured on her even much, much more than he had, after 10 or 12 years of marriage, assuming that they got married soon after the father and her, took him away.
Right.
Well, I had two quick comments too about this, and then we'll move on to season 2. I thought that this short trek was going to end with the scene with all the Mud bots in the closet, and I was happy. I was laughing. I thought we were done, and then though, to cut to Mud's ship where he's got the android factory going and he's being served by versions of himself, and he reveals himself to be the bounty hunter who is selling. The extra little joke at the end that he's not only producing the androids to get out from being caught, but selling them to the people who want to do him harm.
Right.
That was I was like, no, don't. Like, as soon as we cut to the ship, I'm like, oh, you should have stopped in the closet that with the Muds. That was a great way out. And then I was like, no, this was totally worth it. I was worried they were pushing the joke a little too far, and then I really feel like it was a perfect way to end that story. I was really impressed that they took the joke one last place, and they made it an extra con on top of a con.
Yeah,
he's not only he's not only getting out of trouble by creating androids, he's profiting on it. And I thought that was really fantastic. My only other thing, and you'll appreciate this, I think, Aaron, because we've talked about this on Discovery before. Discoverage, we had a return appearance of Ensign Daft Punk, just briefly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Ensign Daft Punk was on. There was at least maybe Daft Punk's brother or sister. It's hard to tell.
Right. Well, there's two people in Daft Punk, so yeah.
Oh, that's right. So it's right. It's the other one. So maybe, and I'm hoping that the author, that the scriptwriter wrote that in specifically, and it wasn't just pulling a costume out of the closet to populate the corridor. I hope that we get Ensign Daft Punk on the lower decks.
Did anybody catch what class the ship DeMilo was?
Oh.
No.
It looked like, it seemed like it, I mean, with the ship redesign, I can't really tell, but I mean, it had a kind of Discovery-ish vibe, but you couldn't really tell what it was. So maybe the Discovery...
And at first, I thought it was Discovery. When we first see it on the scene, I thought it was Discovery, and then as they got closer, I was like, oh, okay, I realized this is not Discovery, but But my first thought was, oh, they're actually going to have a cameo for the ship in here.
Yeah. But maybe just the Crossfield class requires a Daft Punk to help navigate or whatever. Well, anyway, we are at the point on our show usually where we check our threat ganglia and try to figure out who's going to be killed off next. But of course, we've got a whole new season to look forward to. So let's instead speculate on what we think is going to happen and maybe who's going to die in season 2. What do you guys think is coming up? I mean, we've seen multiple trailers, and we've talked a little bit about what we think is happening. But like, what do you think is really going to? I want your speculation on what the Red Angel is. What the lights are. This Discovery has definitely, as a series, has introduced new things to the canon, but also we've got, number one, we've got Spock coming back. We've got Pike. They're definitely down to dig into some of the unused ideas from the original series. So do you think that these new elements are old elements in disguise?
Scott, do you have any thoughts?
I am not at liberty to...
yeah, this is all for Alan.
Oh, okay. He knows too much.
Yeah.
He knows too much. So I mean, I think this is no secret, or at least it's stuff that I've read. So again, spoilery stuff if people want to tune out before they watch, fresh. But Section 31 is going to show up, and the evil Giorgio is going to, I think, be the head of that, or be the person who begins it, or at least takes the reins of it. I think that we're going to see that storyline emerge. I've also read that we're going to see a broken Spock, or I don't know if broken is the right word, but a Spock with issues.
Sure.
So maybe we're going to get at some of Spock's issues through his relationship with his adopted sister. I'm assuming we will, and we're going to have Pike. It's unclear to me, and maybe I've missed this. I haven't read all of the speculation on the coming season, but how they're going to balance the two crews, how we're going to balance the Enterprise is the Enterprise. I mean, Pike is the captain of the Enterprise. He's not going to be the captain of Discovery, right? I mean, like, what's going to happen? Is Saru now the captain of Discovery, and going forward, is that what we've got going for season 2?
Well, there's 3 of us. One of us knows, and 2 of us don't. So I guess we can only really speculate. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really. I would guess that it does seem like Pike is sort of taking provisional command of Discovery, right. Possibly because if these lights are all over the galaxy, we're going to need a ship that can, get out there without it taking hundreds of years. So, right. And then as far as, I'd like to see a lot of number 1, but I don't know, maybe number 1 will just be in a few scenes where it's like, yeah, I got to go over and do this. And she's like, okay, I'll take care of the ship. And maybe that'll be it. So we'll see.
Possibly then what could happen is if they need the Discovery's ability to jump around, then perhaps Pike and Spock come on board, and number 1 remains behind to captain the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And so we'll see her and the Enterprise show up occasionally, because I think this is going to be the biggest trick of season 2, and that's juggling 2 ships. One that we've just started to care about, the Discovery, and one that we all care about because we're Star Trek fans passionately, and that's the Enterprise. Yeah. And so it's going to be a trick for the show not to become the last episode of Enterprise, where you've got beloved characters from another show coming on and hijacking your show. It's going to have to be important that Pike and Spock and number 1, that they are secondary characters to the characters on Discovery. And that's really, I mean, you're asking us to make Spock a secondary character. And that, I mean, he may even become like a primary character for the season, but then it takes the spotlight away from these characters that we're just getting to know, and that, as I said before, I'd love to see more time with, on Disco.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, and we started the show talking about the face of new TV, and one of the facets of that face is, multiple storylines. It's not enough to have Data playing with his cat, in a B story, while there's a crystalline entity or whatever in the A story. And so, right. I think they're up to the challenge if what they're doing is trying to balance these multiple storylines. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how they do it. The Pike Spock relationship is one that has been written about off screen, and fans have enjoyed speculating about and writing about. It'll be interesting to see that develop more in canon on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're going a little long here, so I think that's it for our show this week. But I want to say thanks for joining us, listeners. And if you like what you hear, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EISTPod for updates and to get notified when new episodes of both Enterprising Individuals and episodes of Discoverage are released. You can tweet to us on the show by using the hashtag Discoverage or email us at eistpod@gmail.com. And when you're on the internet, why not head to your listening platform of choice and subscribe to our show. Give us a rating and a review if you think of it, because it really does help us out. And I wanted to say that we've got merch. You can check out our t-shirts available on our TeePublic store. You can search for Just Enough Trope on TeePublic. It's our parent network. Get our snazzy Trek wear. And if you really want to support the show, stop by our Patreon page at patreon.com/EISTpod. And as always, if you like the show, tell a friend. Discoverage returns on January 17th with the premiere of Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. We'll go live as soon as the episode is over, give or take a few minutes, so please join us then. In the meantime, check out our main show, Enterprising Individuals, at enterprisingindividuals.com. Every Wednesday, I and a guest discuss in excruciating detail a selected episode from a Star Trek series. We also have news from the Trek sphere. We'll have continuing updates on Star Trek Discovery and interviews with special guests. And now is a great time to catch up on the show. We just completed our third season, and we are getting ready to debut the fourth season soon. So check it out at enterprisingindividuals.com. Alan, thanks for joining me on the show and talking about this short trek. Can you remind people where they can find you online?
Yep, I'm at Alan Gratz, all one word, on Twitter, ALANGRATZ, and also my website is just alangratz.com.
Yes, and you can find Alan's work on Amazon as well as other places. And Scott, where can people find Generations Geek?
You can find that at generationsgeek.com, and you can also find me on my website, yahshure.net. That's YEAHSURE.net. And that will also have links to my blog and other things. I'm on Twitter and that sort of stuff as well. So you can find me all over the place.
Great. What's coming up on Generations Geek? Give us a sneak peek.
Let's see. The next, the current episode is Ella's big report from Destination Star Trek and some other stuff, and then the next episode after that is William Leisner back on the show to talk about his Star Trek novels and his other writings, and then after that will be what I'm calling our lost episode, reviewing Thor Ragnarok.
Okay.
Where we actually
better late than never.
Yeah, we went to it the sneak preview premiere at midnight or something. Got home and recorded the episode, and it was so late, and I didn't know if I was really satisfied with it, and meant to come back to it and record some more. And eventually just kind of forgot that there was this episode in the can. And so we're going to come back and record some new segments now that we've both watched the movie several other times, and that'll come out in a couple of months.
Sure.
Bonus material.
What was that?
Bonus material.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you can look at it in perspective of everything else that's going on in the Marvel Universe now, too.
Yeah.
So. Well, that's great. Thank you for that. That's it for us and this show. Thanks for listening, and we are signing off. This is Aaron for Alan and Scott saying live long and prosper.